In the second chapter of Philippians, we read how Christ emptied himself, taking on the form of a slave, being born in human likeness. And by becoming human, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. It is thought by many biblical scholars that that part of Philippians is one of the church's oldest hymns. And it gives us a hint into what was important for those first followers of Christ. That in fact, the life of Christ was an example of just how far our God was willing to go to demonstrate the depth of love and compassion that God had for us. Let us open up our hearts to that amazing gift that is to be experienced in this service of worship.
Please stand and join me for the call to worship. God's grace is immeasurable, extending beyond the limitations put forth by insecurity. God's forgiveness knows no bounds. These God-given gifts cannot be earned. Responsible to Jesus and his grace. Glorious God, you are full of grace and mercy. Your gifts stretched over all the obstacles us humans attempt to fabricate. You desire to meet us with love, and through that gift, invite us into the fullness of life that is you. Grant us courage and wisdom, hope and compassion, as we strive to be a people who both celebrate and share the glorious gifts we have received. We offer these of prayer in the name of your glorious gift, Jesus. Welcome to the 11 a.m. worship service at Cypress Creek Christian Church. We are delighted that all of you have chosen to join us this morning, and if you are a guest, we invite you to complete the guest card and the attendance booklets being passed around. In addition, we also encourage you to visit our guest center in the lobby after the service. As is our custom, we will now spend time greeting each other. Let us pass the peace. Today's scripture is from 1 John chapter 4, verse 19. We love because God first loved us. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Same words that we heard last week, the same words we will hear next week. This passage from 1 John, 7 simple words. Join me in prayer. Lord, the depth of your love was made known to us, in part because you loved us. You loved us not in response to what we had done, but because you are truly the initiator, the first actor. May your unconditional love be understood as a gift, an amazing and immeasurable gift to which we say thank you. Amen. In 2000, I ran my first marathon, the Walt Disney World Marathon. I'd been training for it for quite some time. At that time, I was actually living in Kansas City, serving a church there. So when time came, Don and I caught a flight. We flew to Orlando to prepare for the race. Now, my congregation had been excited about it for me and had been just rooting me on. And when the time came, they said, if you can finish fast enough, call us, because I was running on a Sunday, call us and tell us how you did so that we can announce it in worship. Well, since you had to get up about 2:30 in the morning to catch the bus to take you to the gathering place, to be there by 3:45, 4 in the morning, to turn in your packet of information and all your change of clothes, which they would then move to the finish line, and then walk the 1.5 miles to the starting line, where with fireworks they would send you off at 5:30. You had to get up early. And I'm thinking to myself, my goal of 4 hours would get me to the finish line at 9:30, 8:30 Central Time. Won't be any problem. I'll call them, I'll tell them how I did. Well, I finished it in under my goal time. And Donna was there to greet me, and I took her cell phone and I called the church. A woman picked up who was just there at the desk, and she was so excited for me, and she said, I'll let the worship leader know. And she told the worship leader. But what she told the worship leader and what the worship leader shared with the congregation was that I not only had finished the Walt Disney World Marathon, that in fact I had won it. Beating out the other 35,000 runners, including the Kenyan that had taken second in the Boston Marathon the previous year. I had a first, my first marathon, but I did not finish first. There is a difference there. Having a first is not the same as being the first. And in some situations, somebody has a first, but in fact, they were the first. And there are even times when you have a first, you are the first, but you also set forth for others an opportunity for them to have their first experience. Last Sunday, focusing on this same passage from the pastoral letter that we know as 1 John, we talked about why. Why is it that we do what we do? And we focused on the word because. Because God first loved us. We focused on this gracious act of our God, God's unconditional, unmerited love that is shared with us, not expecting a response, not expecting us to return the favor, not expecting that we have the capacity to fully understand the gift. God does it because it's the very nature and character of God. to love unconditionally, not waiting for humanity to initiate it. No, God acted first. But being first, like I said earlier, is not just, being the first doesn't just mean getting there first. There's more to it than that. What I mean by that is the word that we translate as first, F-I-R-S-T, is the best translation that we have of the original Greek word, the original Greek text of the New Testament. The word there in the Greek is the word protos. And yes, it means first, but it means more than that. In fact, it is where we get in our English language the word prototype. Prototype. A person who creates a prototype is someone who, yes, has gotten there first, but it's more than getting to the finish line, getting to the goal. It has to do with creating a model, a template, a blueprint that others will use. In the 12th chapter of Hebrews, we read, "Let us also lay aside every weight, so we can run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of the faith." We're called to run the race of faith. But we are also called to first look to Jesus, who in a sense has already run the race, who has been the pioneer, the perfecter of this race. God first loved us, yes, but we love in response to that initial act of love because we have a pioneer, a trailblazer, if you will, who has given us the model, the template for how we are then to live. There's an ancient story about a king who every day looked out from the castle upon his kingdom and found himself disappointed with what he saw. What he saw was a kingdom that was sad, a kingdom that, the people mistreated one another. There was anger and bitterness, and clearly just the look of the kingdom was not good because people didn't seem to have any pride in their kingdom. Well, the king came up with an idea. And one day in the center of town, he had a tent put up. And there were flaps all the way around. And the king went into the tent. And every day for 3 weeks, he went into the tent and spent the entire day there. People started to gather, wondering what it was that the king was doing inside the tent. Finally, after 3 weeks, he came out and he invited one person to go into the tent with him. They were in there for a while, and then when they stepped out, the king announced to the person who he'd gone in with, but also everyone who was there, that the man was not to tell anyone what he had seen in the tent. The next day, the king did the same thing. He invited a woman into the tent. They were in there for a while, and then they came out, and again, the king told the woman that she was not to tell anyone what she had seen. And this went on day after day after day. But had people been paying attention, from that point that the first person went in, something began to change. Something began to change in the kingdom. People began to treat one another with respect. There seemed to be more compassion and concern, and people seemed genuinely concerned about making sure that the kingdom looked good. What the king had done inside that tent was to build a model of how he envisioned the kingdom, what his belief that it could become. And he took that time to tell those people one-on-one what he believed the kingdom could be. And though they were told not to tell anyone, they had bought into it. and they begin to live differently. They begin to live in such a way that others were drawn into that experience. Well, we are not invited into a tent. No, we instead are invited into a story. We are invited into a story where we glimpse God, the one who was the first actor, the one who was the pioneer, the trailblazer of grace through Jesus Christ. And because we have seen it, because we have experienced it firsthand, that daring and audacious love, well, then we discover that we have been given a gift, but also given a model. We have in that event been given the gracious love of God, but also been given a template for how we are to live in response to that great gift. A love that we cannot pay back, a love that we will always fall short in trying to live it out, but nonetheless, we are called to look upon that love, to embrace it, and to see it as a template for our own lives. God acted first. God loved before the world even knew that it needed that love. God loved before anyone asked for forgiveness. God loved before anyone said the right words or did the right action. God acted first. And not only are we on the receiving end of that marvelous gift, not only are we blessed by that, but we see in it the model, the template for how we are to live. And when you think of it in those terms, it is audacious. Peter Bach, in his book Community, The Structure of Belonging, writes that every time we gather, our gathering becomes a model of the future we want to create. And I would add to that idea that every time we come together and we break the bread and we share the cup, we are redrawing the blueprints that God set forth when God first acted. Because what we find in God's act of love is one who welcomes, who brings in, who draws in all who are broken and hurting, draws in everyone. And what do we do at the table every Sunday? We declare, not because we want it, but because it's who Jesus Christ is, that all are welcome at that table. A friend of mine posted on Facebook a picture, a photograph of the front of a hotel. There was the sign that gave the name of the hotel, said there were vacancies, and then underneath that, I guess the owner of the hotel had put up a saying, and it read this: "You've never really lived until you've done something for someone who can never repay you." You've never really lived until you've done something for someone who can never repay you. That's what God did. God acted first with a love that we could never repay. And there's a moment, and that's what I asked you to do last Sunday, was to take a moment and just to live in that marvelous gift, to allow it to spill over you. But somewhere along the lines, when you realize the depth of that love, there's something within you that feels like it needs to respond. There's something within you that feels like you need to react. And that's when we turn back around and we look at what God has done. Not only is God the one who acted first, but the one who set forth the prototype, the template, the example for how we are to live. This pioneering act of love not only opens the door to true life for all of us, but it invites us to become participants in the sharing of that gift with the world. Over the last few decades, a story has been told and retold. A story that comes out of a Special Olympics. Now, like so often happens, when a story is told over a few decades, it begins to grow and to take on a life of its own. But the story has some historical fact to it, some truth to it. It took place in 1976 in the state of Washington, where people had gathered for a Special Olympics, athletes that had trained hard, and one of the events was a race. And a number of the athletes stood at the starting line, and they heard the starter's gun, and they took off. And there wasn't one of them that did not want to win. Each of them had trained. Each of them wanted to be bold. Each of them wanted to cross that finish line first. But a few steps into the race, one of the runners fell. Some of the runners continued on, but 3 of them stopped, went back, and helped up the fallen runner, and together they walked to the finish line. I told that story at a youth event where I was keynoting. And after it, a young lady came up to me and said, "You know, those athletes won the moment they stopped running the race they were in." And then she went on to say, all of us will probably have one of those moments when we will be given a choice to stop running the selfish race that is ahead of us and to enter into the race of faith that God has put before us. And I think, she said, I think I'll be able to say yes and do the right thing when that moment comes. Because, she said, those athletes showed to me that it was possible. There is something about having a trailblazer, a pioneer, an example of one who acted first on our behalf with no expectation that we were ever going to be able to pay that gift back. But nonetheless, God loved us with that kind of intensity, with that kind of power. And there's something in that experience that, again, wants to respond. And we look to that gift then and realize that God is not just the first actor, but is also the one that sets before us the model, the template for how we are to live. God first loved us. But the passage begins by saying, we love because God first loved us. We love because God set before us the model of how true love is lived out in the world. You pray with me? God, we love because you first loved us, because you first loved us, because you first loved us. Those words have too often been spoken without much reflection or consideration. But when we take into account just how audacious the idea of grace really is, when we begin to fathom your willingness, Lord, to act without any expectation that your act of love will be repaid, when you recognize and are willing to live out that love in a way that changes lives, suddenly we find ourselves breaking free of old models of living. Suddenly we find that we are able to step away from those old models and begin to buy into the beautiful and marvelous model that you have set before us. Your gift of love has freed us, has changed us, has transformed us. And then as we look at it again, it is a model that beckons us to love to the same degree, to love our neighbor And as difficult as it is to even attempt to love our enemy, we risk loving others who may not see any value to our gift. We risk loving, even though it might be rejected and thrown back in our faces. We are willing to take the risk because you, God, did just that. You were willing to risk everything in Christ Jesus to allow us to understand the depth of your love and then to set before us a model, an example of the power of true love. Its transformative power when it is the first actor, when it is extended before someone realizes they need that love, when that gift is offered even before forgiveness is asked, when that kind of love is put forth. It is that kind of love that changes people. God, we know that that gift of love has been shared among those that gather here this day. And we pray, oh God, that each of us will better understand that gift and then look to it as a model. For there are many in the life of this congregation who need to experience that love. There are those who are experiencing health concerns or hospitalizations, waiting for a surgery. And we specifically lift before you Ken, Angie, Stephanie, Dave, Lorraine. We lift up these names believing that not only is your Spirit already at work, but that you are putting a calling upon our own lives so that we might be agents of your love. Agents of love in the lives of these people. We offer these words of prayer in the name of Jesus, who when teaching his disciples set before them a model of prayer, asking them to say, "Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen."
This is the Lord's table. That's my response to those who say, "Why do you invite everyone to the Lord's table?" This is the Lord's table. He has set it. He invites us. We are his spokesperson. His is the way that the Lord wanted it. He invites all who believe in his Son, Jesus Christ, to partake. This is our moment of spiritual renewal. This is my response to those who say, why every Sunday? We do this every Sunday because this is our moment of spiritual refreshment and renewal from our busy work time during the week. We come to this table to remember that awesome gift that God gave to us, the gift of his Son, Jesus Christ, who died on the cross for our sin. We remember that night in the upper room in Mary's house when they had finished eating and the Lord prepared his supper. He took the bread and he broke it. And he said, take, eat, for this is my body broken for you. And then after he had given thanks, he took the cup and he said, take, drink. And as you do this in remembrance of me, for this is my blood of the new covenant, given for you for the remission of sin. As you come forth today and dip your bread into the cup, it is your time to give thanks for that precious and awesome gift that God gave to us, the gift of his Son who died on the cross. It is also time for you to bring forth your tithes and your offerings and place them in the trays at the end of the stage. And if you're unable to come forward, please raise your hand and we will come to you and deliver communion to you. Let us pray.
Because of you, Lord, you have given food to all flesh. May your love endure forever. Amen.
Last Sunday, we talked about the why it is that we do what we do, and we focused on the because. Because God first acted. Today, we looked more closely at that notion of first and found not only did we find a God who acted first, but a God who set forth before us a model for how we are to live with the same kind of love. You may not realize it, but what we talked about last Sunday, talking about today, and what we will talk about next Sunday is what we're talking about is our church's vision, its identity, its purpose. And so I hope that you will be reflective on that, prayerful about what it means to be a person of faith that worships at Cypress Creek, that serves at Cypress Creek Christian Church, a people who first asked, why are we doing what we do? Because God first loved us. What are we supposed to do with that? Well, to take that great gift as a model. And next week, we're going to focus on one more word from that very short passage. Here at Cypress Creek, we're always extending an invitation. As we did at the communion table just moments ago, we continue that idea and invite people who would like to connect their lives with this congregation to do so, to join this covenant community, to connect your life anew with Christ. If you wish to respond to that invitation, you can come forward as we are singing our hymn of discipleship, or by talking to one of our church elders or one of the pastoral staff members immediately after the service. Now I invite you to join your voices on this hymn. This has been our time of worship, but we are people who believe in worshipful works that reach beyond this hour. And so let me tell you some things that are a part of that worshipful works. First of all, as you exit out of here, you will find a table with information about the blessing of the animals and stuffed animals coming up on the first Saturday of October. And what I've loved is every time I have talked about the blessing of the animals and the stuffed animals, people have smiled. And our hope is that when we mail out a little later this week the 20,000 postcards to our neighbors, and they pull that out of their mailbox, that they too will smile and say, we need to get over there and check that out. But that also means we need help from you all. So there are sign-up sheets, and we need some of you to plan to bring your animals, and we hope you will do that for blessing. But we also need people who will give direction, who will welcome, who will be supportive along the way. If you're not a snake person, we won't put you in with the snake area. So, don't worry, we'll find a place for everybody. We celebrate the women's ministry, the wonderful program that happened here yesterday, and we continue to ask blessings upon what they are doing. This afternoon, the worship committee will be meeting, and then tonight at 6:30, both the elders and the general board are meeting together. So just note that. This Wednesday, we continue our gatherings both at 11:30 and at 5:30. There is a brown bag lunch and the study of the introduction to the Apostle Paul from 11:30 to 1, and then at 5:30 we will be gathering for dinner with the study at 6:30. There's also children's programming and youth programming during that time. There is a blood drive next Sunday, and for those of you that can give, I appreciate it as one who is no longer able to give. So thank you. A leadership class has started. This was by invitation only. It's 14 people who have committed to 16 weeks of coming together and talking about and studying the importance of leadership in the life of the church. So I ask of all of you to be prayerful for that group in their next 15 weeks of gathering. And finally, you've seen the 53rd. The 53rd has been up there again and again. Well, we know of 52 Sundays every year. Well, we are inviting people to think about a 53rd, to look at your giving and to divide it by 52 and to ask yourself, could I do a 53rd? Some will be able to do that. Some won't be able to do a full. But what we're inviting people to do is stretch and to think about their giving. For our giving is not just so that we have a building. It's not just for the purpose of having a pastoral staff. It's not just so that we pay our air conditioning bills. It is a discipline. It is a recognition that what I have ultimately belongs to God. And I am called to give a portion back. There is something in the letting go of that reminds us that this belongs to God. And sometimes we need to stretch a little bit. So on the last Sunday of September, the 29th, you will be invited to think about a stretch, a 53rd, if you will. Take the hand of somebody close. Gracious God, you have been a part of what we've been doing this morning. In fact, it's really been you that acted first, that called us together, that made us into the instruments you believe we can be, as ones who've not only received that marvelous gift, but have been called forth to use it as a model in how we interact with others. We ask for your continued blessings upon us as we enter into this new week in the name of Christ. Amen.